The Showboats played against the Roughnecks last week, and this was a slow game. Houston had nothing going on offense. The Showboats had a lot going on. They just couldn't convert that into touchdowns, or frankly, even convert that into field goals the majority of the time. Let's talk about the Roughnecks first. There's not very many bright spots. I have two listed. The first one is their run defense, and with that, their goal line defense. Darius Victor, running back for the Memphis Showboats, he was getting nowhere all day long. Cookus was their leading rusher. For perspective, he had 16 yards, and Case Cookus was the leading rusher for the Memphis Showboats. So run defense was very effective for the Roughnecks, and that really plays a lot into goal line defense, where on those third and shorts, on those fourth and shorts, and even on the goal line a couple times, the Showboats had to settle for a field goal because the Houston Roughnecks early on in the game on that first drive, the Showboats got all the way down to the 1 yard line, and they couldn't score. And it really goes to show that that red zone defense and that goal line defense is certainly a strong point for the Roughnecks, primarily because when you're on the goal line, your first instinct is to run the ball, and the Roughnecks were not letting Darius Victor gain any yardage or, frankly, get past any blades of grass at all whatsoever. And that really helped the Houston Roughnecks stay in this game because the Showboats were kicking field goals instead of scoring touchdowns, whether it was a 3rd and 1 way back at the 20 or a 4th and 1 back at the 40-yard line, or if it's at the goal line. Once you get in those tough short yardage situations, the Roughnecks are not going to budge one bit. And that was really the best thing I saw from the Houston Roughnecks on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, Jared Garantano, he's very good at avoiding sacks. He's very good at throwing the ball away at the right time. On just about every occasion when he was under significant pressure, he managed to get the ball out of his hands in enough time. He didn't take very many sacks. He got hit a lot, and this Roughnecks offensive line that we thought would be incredible did not show that at all whatsoever against the Showboats. And fortunately, Garantano was able to escape pressure and throw the ball away and make it an incompletion. But a few too many incompletions and your drive's over, and we saw that quite a bit. A lot of times you see guys try to extend the play too much and try to make something out of nothing. Garantano was mature enough and disciplined enough to just say, you know what, I don't want to get sacked and I don't want to throw an interception. We're throwing this ball away. We're living to see another day. That was encouraging, except for the fact that that was happening basically every other play because Garantano was constantly under pressure and there really felt like there was nothing he could do about it. And he had just no ability to operate this offense effectively, in part because this Houston Roughnecks offensive line that, once again, we thought was going to be incredible, it wasn't. And it really just showed no signs of being a strong point for this Roughnecks team. It was honestly a liability, a concern. Speaking of concerns, the offense as a whole didn't exist. The Roughnecks ended the game, I believe, with 12 points. It was 18-12. Garantano was under too much pressure, and he didn't have anyone to throw to. Granted, Jared Garantano isn't Superman either. I think if you put him on I think if you put Jared Garantano on the Panthers, he could find a lot of success if you put him on a better roster, and the Panthers aren't even the best roster in the league, and I still think Garantano would find a lot of success there. I have a lot of questions about this offense because the offensive line wasn't doing enough, and there weren't enough playmakers outside for Garantano to throw to. And this offense, we knew was going to be reliant on Mark Thompson on the ground. I said this when we were previewing the USFL conference. We knew that the Houston Roughnecks were going to be the type of team where you're just going to play good defense, which they didn't. Well, they did. They were pretty good defensively against this Showboats team in week 1. They were just going to play good defense and run the ball with Mark Thompson. And if you can get 5 yards on the ground with him every single play, you're in a very good spot. And that it's just not something they can rely on. And that wasn't something that they could rely on in this past game because Mark Thompson got hurt in training camp, right? Houston's not in a good spot. Their best player on offense. The one reliable leg that they can stand on and one reliable wall they can lean on is hurt. He's out. Mark Thompson, he's not playing. I don't know when he's going to be back, but it's not soon. And the Roughnecks now are in a really tough position because even if you play good defense and hold this Showboats team to 18 points, which was impressive, knowing how much firepower the Showboats have through the air on the offensive side of the ball, that should be enough points for you to win. And the Roughnecks just couldn't do it because offensively they didn't have it. They didn't have that pizzazz that was going to allow Garantano to consistently find a rhythm, make throws to his receivers, and ultimately get the ball in the end zone. It didn't really happen for the Roughnecks, and the Showboats have won this past game. 18-12, I believe, was the final score, but it certainly looked a whole lot worse than that. The secondary for the Roughnecks, I am hesitant to call this out as a point of concern because you could just chalk this up to being the Showboats being incredible and Case Cookus having incredible receivers around him and being an incredible quarterback himself. But the Houston Gamblers of last season had some questions in the secondary as well. Cookus went 23 for 40 for 204 yards and a touchdown. Dawood Davis had 7 catches, which is far too many. And if this type of defensive performance in the secondary happens again next week against Jordan Ta'amu and the Defenders, it might be a real concern that we need to hyper-focus on because, this secondary we saw with the Houston Gamblers last season was a huge liability, and they got picked apart by the Stallions, and just it was hard to watch. And now you come into this past game where the Roughnecks, just Cookus was doing whatever he wanted. The Showboats beat themselves a lot. They made a lot of mistakes. They allowed themselves to lose in a lot of ways. But, fundamentally, the Memphis Showboats should not have been able to gain that much chunk yardage that consistently against the Houston Roughnecks secondary. That is concerning to me. They go against Jordan Ta'amu and the Defenders next week, who struggled, but Jordan Ta'amu is Jordan Ta'amu, and he is talented enough to completely dismantle your secondary, and I would not be surprised if we see that happen at all whatsoever. Houston's in a really bad spot. They're probably the one team in this entire league that I don't believe in. I have such a low amount of faith in Houston. Sorry, I lost my words there. Houston Roughnecks, I have very little faith in them and their ability to make a run and win games. I think 3 to 4 wins max with this offense, this defense, and the few strong points across the board. I think 3 to 4 wins is what we're going to be looking at for this team overall. And it really concerns me, and it really makes me sad, actually, to look at this Houston Roughnecks team and know that this brand is probably not going to be playing a very high level of football very, very soon. Now, on the winning side of this game, we have the Memphis Showboats. They have a lot of bright spots. This passing attack is exactly what we thought it would be. They're just getting started. 18 points. They're going to score a whole lot more than 18, maybe as soon as next week. But this Memphis Showboats, they really showed a lot of promise through the air. Case Cookus constantly was delivering strikes to his receivers all across the field, especially over the middle on some of those crossing and slants. But even under pressure, but he was getting hit hard, and he was still making incredible throws for 15-plus yards. It wasn't just that aspect of this game in general. It wasn't as noticeable as we maybe thought it would be, but it will be way more noticeable when you notice the fact that the Memphis Showboats cannot stop completing passes. They're just getting started. It's only going up from here through the air for the Showboats, and we saw a lot of promise, and we saw a lot of opportunity for them in this past game. That's their biggest bright spot. Concern-wise, the run game and in the red zone, they did not perform very well. They didn't have anything going on in the run game. Granted, you can chalk that up to the Houston Roughnecks run defense just being incredible. We'll see if Darius Victor has a little bit more success on the ground against the Brahmas next week. But it frustrated me sometimes because the Showboats kept going back to the run game when there was nothing there. It was essentially a wasted play and a wasted down because there was never going to be anything there. And it took them a while to figure that out, which I obviously understand. It took me a while to figure out as well. But every time they ran the ball in the second half, I was like, what are we doing? Because you're gaining maybe half a yard, if that. You honestly have a better chance of losing yards than you do gaining them on a run play. Why are we running the ball in 2nd and 9? They only made a play call like that a few times throughout the entire game, so that's a good sign. But once the Showboats figure out what they are and what their identity is, and once they really realize how heavily they can lean on Case Cookus and those receivers, they're going to be in a much better spot. Hopefully they can get to the red zone every single time. The question is whether or not they can convert once they're in the red zone against some of those stronger red zone defenses that the Stallions had in some incredible red zone defense this past week, and the Roughnecks did as well, I suppose. But being able to, they're already able to drive down the field. They just need to convert once they get close to the end zone. That's really what I want to see the improvement wise from this Showboats offense, and they're only headed for the top, right? It's a crowded USFL conference. There's a lot of good teams. The Stallions are obviously incredible. The Panthers are obviously emerging as incredible. The Showboats are what they are. And what's the other? And then the Houston Roughnecks, of course, who I don't believe are going to play much of a role in the playoff race. So really, it's 3 teams with a good chance of going to the USFL Conference Championship, and the Showboats have a real good chance to be one of them. They're 1-0 with a win in division. They take on the Brahmas next week, which is a major opportunity, and Cookus is putting them in prime position to get to the USFL Conference Champion and maybe the UFL the UFL Championship after that. They made a lot of mistakes schematically, leaning on the run too much, They made a lot of mistakes, this Showboats team did overall. Cookus threw a tough interception, and looking at all those mistakes and realizing that they still undeniably beat out this Houston Roughnecks team in week 1, that is impressive to me, and that makes me very encouraged about what the Showboats can do in the future.